record this. Okay. All right, split screen. All right. So, by the way, this is the assignments that we have due. Okay. I added this one. This is the rewrite in person, basically. Okay. As you can see, here's the rewrite for the original. Sorry, here's the original story assignment. And then here's the rewrite, which is, again is due May 3rd. Is again for the reactions to the snow. And now, if you know, you should be able to get. If I have any questions about maybe a lack of depth in a story or something like that, maybe you could use a little more information, maybe in an anecdote or something like that. You've got probably plenty of sources now because we got an even bigger snowstorm to deal with, and it sucks. Let's just face it, okay? I put Benjamin's story in here in the assignment entry. Okay, if you could see it. All right. But it's also here. And I also put it in an announcement. Okay. Let's try to get it out. Here we go. All right. A little small, a little small. All right. All right. So basically, I'm looking for a lead that basically just, you know, says it straight. Okay. Active voice lead. Okay. I thought some people tried to get a little bit too research papery and a little bit too Shakespeare-y with this lead. Just really, it's got to be an active voice, straight lead with the noun or subject before the verb are tired. Okay, the enormous amount of snow that's piled up and how it impacts their daily routine. So it's good to have like the overall idea, which is that they're tired of this, and an angle basically. It basically says how it impacts their routine. Because think about it. I mean, what does this snow do more than anything? It impacts our routines, you know. And a bunch of you mentioned the parking. A bunch of you mentioned, you know, trying to walk on these icy sidewalks, things like that. All right, so then it's good to have like transitions. Might remember that video of the I showed of the students reacting to the tragedy on campus almost 40 years ago. How the TV reporter basically walked us from point to point, essentially introducing different points of reaction to the drinking on campus and the impact it was having. So this is the same thing. You have essentially, basically, students say that they're, the first point essentially, and that is that walking has become an issue, and they've decided this, it's basically impacted their class attendance. So that's like essentially like the first point is being brought up here. And then this is a good anecdote right here. Notice how it's mostly paraphrased, okay? Um, okay, so, you know, basically, I can't really pronounce that last name, Venki, a sophomore, has to deal with this issue tenfold since he has to walk 10 minutes to a bus stop. Not only is no issue for him, but having to traverse the snow and cold weather has been too much for him, okay? So something that's relatable, something that's basically like a little story within a story, something we can all connect to. Okay. Um, I felt like some people kind of like got a little bit too short. Like maybe, an anecdote should be at least two sentences. Okay. It doesn't, if you have one sentence, it really doesn't it just doesn't really say enough. I mean, let's try to like talk about like, maybe some of the emotions they're going through or some of the, routines they've had to change or that sort of thing. You don't have to write like a whole novel about it, but you have to, but basically something that maybe is at least a few sentences long. Okay. Um, Now these are partial quotes. I mean, ideally, you probably would want to have something like this. You know, it's too much work for what I'm getting out of it. That's a good direct quote. This is, I don't know, is this a he or she or they? I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, he said. Okay. Um, But anyway, this is a good direct quote, okay? Because it just shows emotion, it shows a little bit of color. It's too much work for what I'm getting out of it. you'll see on some of your papers, and I've sent like a whole bunch of them out to people this morning, and last night. But it's if you have like a really long quote, it just basically mentions a lot of things that are happening in a person's life where they're saying like, I had to walk down the street and no, there was a slippery sidewalk and it was 3 a.m. and tends to run on and it tends to meander and that sort of thing. That's done much better as a paraphrase, okay? That's done much better by using like things like periods and like shorter sentences and just basically having control over your own writing, paraphrasing, okay? Like what's done here, okay? Um, Another anecdote, another sophomore has watched people slip inside his dorm. This okay, so this is basically about so this is actually you can have like two anecdotes under the same transition, you know. The next transition comes here. Other students have to drive. Other students will have to drive, so we have the commuter angle. I've said that finding a parking spot has been a nightmare. Thomas Priest, a junior, drives 20 minutes to get to classes every day. He usually parks on College Avenue, but the way Rutgers has plowed the parking lots leaves less spots. He has pointed out that Rutgers will just move all the snow in one area of the parking lot, cutting off. See how like each sentence is very direct. There's periods that basically stop the sentence from running on and going on forever, making that would make them hard to read. You know, they're all very active voice. You have your subject and then your verb. Okay, you have your subject and then your verb. All right. Um, and then you have like a partial quote basically here that basically shows like a little bit of motion, a little bit of color. All right. And then we have another transition. The streets have made a lot of snow, and that is yet to be cleaned up, forcing people to park in the middle of the road. Okay. Okay. Um, Maybe this would work better as like this. Okay. So, you have basically essentially um, again, another anecdote, is used to getting to the campus, finding where the best places to park are. I mean, some of these questions you could basically maybe you lived your own experience, and you can like, I'm not telling you to put words in people's mouths, but basically like you're able to ask those questions because maybe you've experienced them yourself, I think this works as a good like direct quote. Either I get a ticket for parking in the middle of the road, or I get a ticket for parking in a place I don't belong. Kind of shows a little bit of frustration, emotion, color. Okay, that's what you should use quotes for. Okay. Um, all right. Some people mixed in, of course, people who actually like the snow, which is fine. But the story is predominantly about how people are just freaking frustrated about this whole thing. And God, I mean, how many times, how many times have we just like, seen enough of this crap just basically hindering our routine? So, if I do have any kind of questions on your stories about like trying to provide more depth to anecdotes, maybe a couple more sentences or something like that, you should have a good opportunity. Hopefully, go back to these people even and say like, well, "What do you think now? How's it affecting you now?" I mean, now we're moving on to what our fourth or fifth week of this. So, all right. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay. All right. So shifting now, we're actually moving into essentially the second half of the semester, believe it or not, and I was going to actually have my guest speaker appear on Friday, but now because of this whole thing with the snow, I thought it would be better if I dealt with it now. Um, the second half of the semester essentially deals with, I would say, more of the reporting end of things. The first half of the semester deals with this. Yes, believe it or not, we're actually there because spring break is just around the corner, and I'm giving you essentially what would be the first assignment I would typically give in the second half of the semester, and it deals with was much more of an emphasis on not just like writing well, but also reporting well, digging up stuff. Okay. And I gave you a little bit of a taste of that with this snow story because I asked you to dig a little bit into people's lives. Now I'm asking you to like actually do a little more digging because what happens is that people, reporters are often given assignments or they're often given things to do. They're often given things that are land in their lap that you know it might give them like some sort of first impression, but it might not be their last. But it might not be the last impression they get out of the story. What they have to do is they have to figure out what the story is really about. Oftentimes, when news is handed to people, it's handed in the form of a press release, and often those press releases can obscure um, what people, essentially what the news is. So far, what we've been dealing with in class is just interviewing people directly, that sort of thing, interviewing people in class. Now I'm asking you to go beyond that, actually, and essentially um, go to two different sources for news in this particular story. Okay, so that's this thing I just actually just posted today. Um, it's so it's also the most common way to actually, most common form of a story is to actually rewrite a press release. Essentially, it's become the number one way of delivering news in the last, I would say, 30 years. Even in this digital age, it may come in the form of an email, it may come form of a post on a social media. I've talked to you about essentially like things like traffic accidents, stuff like that. I mean, the way that news is delivered is typically in a press release or a press statement from the police that's posted on social media like Facebook and things like that. But oftentimes, when those things are actually delivered, that news, again, when that news is delivered, it's not delivered in a way that's actually maybe like suitable for your audiences. And I say suitable, I mean, or conducive, or something that actually like gives them the news, the real news. Okay. You might remember that going back to just a couple weeks ago when we did the Leeds assignment. Remember I said to y'all, um, you know, when you look at like a story about an attempted murder, okay, um, is that really just the story? You might remember that one of those issues that was brought up on the Leeds assignment was an attempted murder involving two elderly people. Okay, um, but reporters often have to dig to get to like essentially like the most obtainable version of the truth, as I've talked about. So if you dig a little bit into that story I talked about, into that story that's on the worksheet, that lead, you find that actually it's not just an attempted murder. It's actually something that's like so unique that there's probably no story that could ever replicate it, and that is that a woman tried to kill her husband because he ate her chocolate Easter bunny. Okay, so we try to like actually just keep digging and asking questions till we get down to the truth of the matter and the heart of the matter and what really like matters to people and what really grabs their attention. And that's what we're essentially going to do here. Okay. Um, it's going to be a story where you rewrite a press release. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video, as I mentioned. That was supposed to, again, it was supposed to be the guest appearance from Bill Borden, but it's actually a recorded one that I have now um, that I typically show in the summertime, to be honest. So what he's going to do, essentially, he's going to give you a background on what he does and what he's done in the news business. He actually works with me now, but he's essentially a business news writer who has made a living out of writing stories out of press releases, information coming from not just like sources that men on the women or on the street sources, but people who work for corporations and stuff like that. And then in corporations and police departments and things like that, they don't usually like send out somebody to talk to you directly and give you information. They issue a press release. So what you have to do is you have to look at the press release and you have to say to yourself, okay, is this the news that I really want to deliver to the public? Okay. So anyway, so as this assignment says we're now moving into the reporting end of phase as well as the public relations phase of this course. So, journalism also includes the whole area of public relations, which many of may know about already. That's essentially when you have somebody like some sort of person or department or a company or something like that, like represent you and present in delivering communication from your company entity that or whatever. And what they do is considered news delivery or journalism too. It's just that their audience typically is the media. They're actually trying to deliver news to the media, so the media will deliver it to the general public. Okay. Only it's your job to actually like make it interesting to the public. So as it says here, this assignment will require you to do more than repeat what's told to you. This will look to get people to think on their feet and think outside the box. Okay, the big thing is we're actually playing a game of pretend here. This is actually a made up press release I'm sending you guys, okay? You have to act quickly and right away. This assignment requires you to make an initial contact right away with our source, who's our essentially our guest speaker on the video I'm about to show you. He's going to play the role of company spokesperson for this company called Megalomania. Okay. Um, all right. So you're rewriting a press release and turning it into a news story. Rewriting means you're taking it's a little bit different than the way we've described rewriting in this class. You're going to take a press release that's given to you and write it in a way that's actually like interesting to the public. Press release is a focus right now is a focus that prioritizes the company's point of view. But you're writing for the general public, so you need to determine what the focus should be and what matters to the public at large. Okay. And after reading the release and determining, so what you should do is you should look at this release and determine what really the focus of this story should be, like what matters to people. I have it right here. This is actually, I should tell you also that it's also right here. Okay. Let me know if you have a hard time downloading this. Okay. I also will go over this in class on Friday. I assume that we will be in class. I know there's going to be some snow later this week, but anyway, this is so anyway, you download it from here. Um, and let's see here. All right. Just give me a second here. I'm sorry, I just lost my place. This is it, right? Um, all right, so this is the press release. Okay, it's dated March 6th because this is actually the deadline for the assignment. Deadline for the assignment is March 6th. So you have to almost pretend that you're writing this like it's happening on the day that the assignment is due. Okay. And what it is essentially is a company change. This Megalomania company, the world's leading provider of entertainment, announced it's forming an office of chief executive. I can tell you one thing right now is that your story, this is not going to be the lead of your story because you know why? Because this is boring. Nobody really gives a damn about a restructuring. Okay, what you have to do is you have to go through the release and find out what in here is mentioned that would be interesting to people. Okay, as at large, that would go beyond the business world. And what I really strongly suggest you do is that you, and I mentioned this in here, is that you reach out to me in the next couple of days, because you have about a week and a half to do this assignment, and you ask me, like, is this the lead? It's always good to like check in with your editor and see, like, what do you think the focus is here? I'm not really sure. Okay. And once you determine what that focus is, then you then you need to email Bill Borden, who again will play the role of company spokesperson. Here's his email address right here. Okay. And ask for additional information. Okay. All right. And then he's going to have additional information that will back up what your new story focus will be. Okay. So a lot of this right now, I am actually recording all this right now. So if you need to go back and look and check out what we're talking about and that sort of thing, I'm going to send out this video to everybody. Okay. All right. Again, this is due March 6th. It's going to be a 500 800 word story. You'll submit it to this assignment entry. Okay. But I would say like try to really like get started on this right away. I know a lot of us, again, I was a student too. We wait till the last minute to do stuff, but really try to go through this press release and determine what you think is the information that would matter to the most to people. Okay. There's a lot of things that are talked about here. There's like Bill's sense of humor is in here. There's some goofy things in here, that sort of thing. Okay, but there is a moment where you kind of probably would say like, "Wait a minute, what happened here?" You know. And then that's when you got to ask the question, like, "Well, what happened here?" You know, and you ask that question to Bill, and then Bill's going to supply you actually documents of information that will tell you what happened here. Okay, was rather extraordinary. It's based on a real event. Okay, so. All right, so I'm going to show this video right now. Not going to show the whole video. Um, I realized that this, you know, this actually could run a little bit longer than like I typically have for a class time, but I'll try to make sure that it like fit as much in as possible. Okay. Um, all right. Let me just get this here. Eh, okay. All right. Sorry for the noise. That will actually do a little bit of talking first. Provide more detail on exactly what happened. You have to pay really close attention to the details, especially the Excel spreadsheet of what happened. Okay. So anyway, here I give you Billboard. Thank you very much. It's Billboard. He's been a guest speaker of mine for a very long time. He's been very generous with his time. He's worked journalism. I should not. It's Nepo. He's a Nepo baby. We've been friends in diapers. Okay, so anyway, but this guy's been a very successful journalist. So what we're going to talk about today, actually, essentially, is public relations and business writing in particular, because those essentially are two areas of journalism that are actually, well, you could argue this, I guess, right, Bill? But yeah, where there's been actually some like a steady growth, I would say. Yes, there's been cutbacks in PR and stuff like that, but these are two clear options for you to consider if you actually think about going into journalism. And a lot of people, in my classes actually don't go into journalism now. That's fine. Um, so anyway, so Bill has actually worked in these fields for a very long time. He worked for Reuters, it's one of the largest business news agencies in the world, and he also worked for various PR agencies, and now he works with me at AMBest. So, which is essentially his business journalism. And the thing about business journalism is that it's probably, like I said, there's growth, but it's probably the most basic way to learn how to like really write and when you think about it, like what's like a typical business story report about? Uh, Stocks, very good, yeah. And what does stocks involve? Money, right? Money, economy, all that stuff. Okay, so it's you know, so you have to do a little bit of digging sometimes, and we're going to talk about digging and how to get that information, what's behind the numbers and stuff like that. But first, I'd like you to actually, it's important for you to actually meet people who are in the field and have succeeded in it. Bill, like I said, worked for Reuters, one of the largest news agencies in the world, and he worked for various PR agencies. Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself that I haven't already told you? Who are you? Oh, okay. What are you all about? Tom and I went to the same elementary school together, or I should say, Professor Davis and I went to the same elementary school and high school. And we both edited the high school newspaper as seniors. And then we went our separate ways. Tom went to Rutgers. I went to what is now known as the College of New Jersey. Back when I was there, it was Trenton State College. And then we, let's see. We both worked at our respective college newspapers. At Trenton State College, I worked at a weekly called The Signal. We published every Tuesday. So my Monday nights were usually spent putting together the college newspaper. I was a production manager, a news editor, and a sports editor while I was there. I also obtained internships at the Trenton Times and the Asbury Park Press. A bit of advice to all of you, if you have any interest in going into the writing field, journalism, get your clips while you're in college. There's no better way to go into a job interview than to have a portfolio of published work. It's funny
And
you say that, Bill, because I mean, I love my son and everything, but he now he wants to go into journalism, and he just graduated college, and like the whole time he was in Boston, I was like, "Look for the newspaper."
yeah,
It's not like actually working for the newspaper is actually you don't have to be in journalism to go work for a newspaper. It's actually good to get some sort of portfolio. You know, I mean, it's in fact you can work for Patch for nothing. I mean, nobody likes that, but that's probably the numero uno if you want to get like some sort of job, maybe soon after college, something like that. Is have some sort of portfolio.
yeah, and it's really, really an easy time to do it. I mean, your college newspaper always needs the help. They'll, sometimes you have to get past the clickiness to get assignments, but usually they'll give you easy assignments at first just to see if you could write well. Um,
And my niece, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, again. I'm sorry. My niece, by the way, was a microbiology major at RIT, and she was like the editor of the newspaper. So, and now she works at Rutgers as a microbiologist. How about that?
oh, very cool. No,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to get a broad range of experience. In some ways, I think sociology would be as good of a major to lead you into a career in journalism because that gives you some idea of looking at bigger picture issues or themes or trends that you see in the industry. Um, but I think what's most paramount is writing well, writing clearly, writing accurately. Speed should be the last priority. You want to get it right because you can't be any worse than wrong when you're writing. If you get it first and you get it wrong, you're just completely undercutting yourself and damaging your credibility. So it's really important that you get it right. So accuracy is paramount. One of the key elements also is when you're doing any sort of reporting, you need to attribute who you're getting your information from. That's the first question that any reader or editor is going to have is who says this? Who is saying this, and it's really a key element in financial reporting, political reporting. Um, Basically having your sources lined up and making clear who is saying what, and that also gives your reader a sense of, is there a point of view that this source, why is this source telling the paper this? So you'll probably have additional lessons later on when you're talking about how to attribute facts. Some people might have a vested interest in saying, I'll give this to you on background, and that means they want to inform you but don't attribute the details to that particular source, and they're just kind of leading you in a way to go verify it on your own by additional sources. So that's a very that's a much deeper discussion when you're talking about sources and not negotiating how to attribute particular details. um,
When you do that, Bill, it's like what is that? You say he said, she said, they said. What does that do? What does that give the story? It gives.
well, yeah, you want to be fair when you're reporting. You don't want to. You always want to give people an opportunity to respond to negative details. I mean, even if you're under a tight deadline, you should at least pick up the phone and make a call to see if you could get somebody on the line. And if a story is particularly inflammatory, you might want to give them a bit of leeway rather than, like, hey, you got 3 minutes to tell me your response to this. Especially if it's very, very damaging. When we were when I was at Reuters, one of the things that we had to be careful about was if there were bankruptcy rumors about a company, um, because once you put it out there that there's rumors of a bankruptcy, all of a sudden creditors and suppliers get very nervous because they might not get their money back, and they might like withhold let's put it this way: you could be that story that says, "Oh, this company's on the verge of bankruptcy." That might be the tipping point that pushes them into bankruptcy, and essentially could cause undue problems. So I think you want to be fair when you're reporting. Um, and I think
how did you start out? Like, would you?
well, yeah. I mean, going to Reuters was not my first job by any stretch. I mean, I had my internships when I was in college, and then I had trouble finding a job getting at a newspaper right out of school. Even though I had these clips, it took me about a year to find work. So I was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but I still wanted to write. Sold insurance for a while, still trying to get my foot in the door at a newspaper. Um, Eventually, I worked at the Ocean County Observer and then the Times Beacon newspapers, working at a weekly. And at that weekly, I covered everything from town hall, school boards, police, feature stories, uh, community events. I mean, it was really a good starting ground to get a lot of broad exposure and a lot of writing done. I was responsible for filling 4 broadsheet pages, which is no easy feat every week. So you kind of wrote longer than you might otherwise would, especially when you're covering town meetings. Um, so what some papers would do is, like, oh yeah, give me 500 words on this story. You might go as long as 1,000 words, because you just need to fill the space. Um, it really depended on what sort of news hole you have, because you're putting the copy around the ads at the newspaper. Since everything's gone digital, you do have a bit more leeway when it comes to story length, but I think there's also a general sense that you don't want to write too long because most people are reading the news on their phones. You want to keep it to maybe, unless it's really compelling, 1,000 words is tops for a pretty significant story. I mean, you might go longer if it's like a huge feature that has, significance, or uh, the the subject matter is really, really compelling. I don't think most town meetings make that bar. So you should keep your reader in mind when you're writing these articles. And
That's like the most basic level, right? Like the town meetings. Town meetings, pretty different than like council meetings, local school board meetings, things like that. That's like your most basic. That's like one of the first things you do if you're to work in a newspaper or news field, is probably do something like that. And there's a need for that because they've been cutting, a lot of the places have been cutting back on that kind of coverage. And you want to know if like people are raising taxes in town, or if your town, like Eagleswood Township, is lacking sewers, and the septic is backing up in the backyard. Actually, but Bill, you love journalism.
I do. It's fun.
Your mama used to tell me see, this is nepotism right here. I'm sorry. Your mom used to tell me about how you used to read the newspaper when you walked down the street, First Street Parkway, Point Pleasant Grove.
Yeah, well, I was so always
used to read in the back seat of my mom's car myself. I used to read the sports section. And anyway, but then you had a baby when you were like 25, 26, something like that.
Yeah.
You were like hell bent on like succeeding in this field. I mean, you went from a weekly newspaper to this major news agency, Reuters, because of his smarts, and then he succeeded at it. And you basically took like any job they offered you, right? I mean, like what it was.
Well, the equities, the equities desk was just it's the very definition of a news mill. Basically, we would have PR Newswire feeding us the news, and it would be just if you're basically writing financial news for stock traders, and they depend on speed and accuracy more than anybody. The idea is that if your company has shares that are traded on the marketplace, one of the obligations is for those companies to disclose how much money they're making every quarter, disclose news that might influence the direction of a stock price, good or bad. They can't hide the news, although some companies have tried to release news at dodgy times, hoping that it would be ignored. But I think one of the things that you find out about markets is that they do react when things come out. One of the dodgiest disclosures that I've seen was when a company put out a profit warning on, like in the evening of July 3rd, hoping that the July 4th holiday would kind of dwarf the news. And
What do they call that, Bill?
the next trading day, well, it's, just
News dump.
news dump. You'll find a lot of bankruptcies get declared at 5 o'clock on a Friday, hoping that it only appears in the Saturday edition of the paper rather than the Sunday edition.
Seems like stuff in the presidential campaign too.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody. I think, and I guess one of the things that you do. I mean, I'm sure some of you want to go into PR. Some of you want to go into journalism. I mean, if you go into neither, learning how to write well is just really important for your career, no matter what you do. Whether you want to go into law, academia, marketing, or just being a manager somewhere, you have to be able to write well to share your thoughts and help sell your thoughts to investors, your managers, your bosses, your colleagues, your fellow employees who may report to you at some point. I also, if you do want to go into any sort of management field, I also highly recommend developing presentation skills. Being able to speak in front of a crowd and articulate a plan is a crucial skill for leadership. I can't stress it enough because I think just putting up a bunch of slides and talking, regurgitating what you see on a slide doesn't really do much as far as presentation skills. I think you need to be able to go up and use those slides. If you're going to be using the slides, what you want to do is talk to the slides, not just regurgitate the slides. So those slides are only tools to keep you on track if you're presenting before an audience. You just don't use them as a complete crutch and bore your audience. So, that's a little bit of a sidetrack there. But in terms of going into, I was at Reuters for 12 years, so I'll just go back to that. I worked at the equities desk. I covered retailing. It was fun for a bit. I also moved into the field of healthcare because I got tired of retailing. I think one of the things that would help you in your career is to be willing to learn what other people don't want to learn. Hard subjects are always good. Science, economics, technology, I think will give you a much more stable place in the job front rather than focusing on writing about pop culture, because it's very hard to break through doing that because it's kind of seen as light material.
But you cover the Versace family.
I did. Like I said, I moved on after a few years of covering retailer, but there are fun moments. After Gianni Versace was murdered in front of his home in I think it was Miami Beach. He was down in Miami, but I don't know if it was Miami Beach, but it was in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the city. He was murdered by a man. I think it was 1996. But his family had to show that the business was still viable, even though Gianni was the guiding creative force of this business.
Fashion.
So his family invited a bunch of reporters over, and it was quite shows you really how the other half lives because he had this mansion down in Miami, but he had a townhouse on the Upper East Side that was barely a stone's throw away from Central Park. And I met Donatella Versace. I met his brother Santo, and they kind of did this meet and greet with reporters to let them know that the business is still going on. I ended up coming away with this story. The brother was talking about actually taking the company public. It never came to be because, I mean, when you do take your company public and sell shares to outside investors, you kind of have to like do a lot of disclosures. And, I think family businesses, I mean, it does help with bringing in new capital, but if you're essentially bringing in enough capital and keeping the family happy, I mean, why do you want to open the doors to having other people tending to your business?
How did you cross over into PR? Like, I know you went to graduate school, which I recommend anybody because that's the way things are nowadays.
Yeah, I went to night school at Montclair State and picked up an MBA going to night classes 2 days a week. And some of those days were kind of rough because I would be up at 5:30 in the morning at my desk by 7 a.m., work from 7 to 3, and then get in my car, go to Montclair State, do my homework, and then go to class till about 9:30, and then get home by 10:15 or so, and then I wouldn't be able to go to sleep till about midnight. And so then you get up at 5:30 and start it all over again. There were a lot of times where you find yourself working on projects after your class, and you might be going to work on 3 hours of sleep. Not something I recommend, but that's just sometimes what the circumstances dictate. Opportunities for engagement there. So
moving ahead.
moved up. Well, what happened was a client took some work in house, and this is a thing. Let go because that's the and freelanced a bit. Then
Let's get moving ahead from the career stuff.
Try and stay humble no matter where you go, or just at least be nice to people. I mean,
So I got a story, Bill. I don't mean to cut into your time, but I'll try to keep it short.
And I'm
When you find the article, showed it like
I have over 1,300 connections on LinkedIn. I mean that's really
So here he's saying social media is important. I wanted to advance some of this stuff so we can fit this whole video in.
a great network to have for your career. I'll kind of give an overview of the assignment. It's basically a fictional media company, Megalomania Media. So if you do any sort of Googling of the people that are referenced in it, you're basically, you will see old Mets players' names rather than people that are, actually true business executives.
this is gonna be a game of pretend, and this is what this morning said. But since we're moving into the reporting phase of the course, some will require you to do more than just repeat what's told to you. This will look to get people to think on their feet. We're playing a game of pretend, as I just said, and you really have to act quickly. Okay, I know I was a student too. Bill was a student too. You know about the whole thing about like waiting till the last minute. I get it. Do stuff that's I understand, but this one really, any kind of journalism, any kind of work really, but especially journalism, I think. It's really like situational in terms of like what you got to do, what you got to in order to get information. You got to like take into consideration the calendar, like when people are available and that sort of thing. Okay. course, this was a bigger issue before we had the internet. When you had to rely on people on phones, stuff like that, you couldn't call people at night. Now you can like just email people, whatever, and then they'll answer you anytime. But the point is that it's really like good to get a jump on things ahead of time. Even just like sending out an email saying, "What is this? Okay, what is this story about?" Okay, so what you're going to get essentially is this: you have to act quickly. And what you're going to get essentially is this press release that's actually embedded into this story assignment. Okay. Now, here's where I talk about like why we're shifting more into reporting mode. So what we've been doing so far is pretty much just standard, straight reporting. You know, you interview somebody, you're told what to do, you're told what they're about, you're told what's unique. Now you're going to be presented with something that's actually kind of what they call in baseball, essentially a screwball or a knuckleball, where it's unpredictable. Okay. And where you have to actually essentially craft something on your own and use your own news judgment. And it's not so easy. It's not like right there in your face necessarily. The reporter radar, as I've described before, isn't going to necessarily go off right away. What happens is, and Bill will tell you this, is that there's a lot of companies, especially like companies that are going through some sort of a bad time. And I'm not saying this is a scandal or anything wrong or anything like that. And Bill will tell you, public relations, this is what public relations is all about, is that your audience is not direct public typically, it's the media, right? So you want to like present to the media if there's something that's going wrong with the company or something, you want to present it in a good light. It's called spinning, right, Bill?
Well, yeah, and really one of the things that you want to do if you're in public relations is if you have a story that is significant, you want to get ahead of it. If you're on the PR side of the fence and you want to turn what could be like a multi-day bad story into cut that timeline into fewer and fewer days. You don't want things dragging on and on. So you want some degree of damage control where you take your hit just one day. Sometimes you can't do that if there's ongoing issues, especially if your company is in court on a particular matter. That's something where you have less control, but that's one of those things where when you're in the field of PR, you want to have a plan of action. Like, okay, how do you manage a communications plan when you have people saying bad things about your company in a court of law?
What I can tell you, and I say this in assignment, is that like, so you have that kind of situation like as Bill was describing, where like you may end up in court, you may end up in jail, you may end up in maybe business executives literally in handcuffs. This isn't really the case with this particular this press release, but
no, in fact, what happens with a lot of you see, when your company is publicly traded, you announcing an executive change because that's something that could move the stock one way or another. The idea is that when you have outside investors, that's when you have to have some degree of transparency about who's in charge, how much money are you making, is this, give your investors a sense of the direction of the business. So those are important elements in any sort of announcement that you might be making as a business.
So just pretend that it's like the breaking news on the day it's due. Okay, that makes sense. What I can tell you is that basically this lead of this press release right here is not going to be the lead of your story. I'll tell you that much. Okay, since media companies, it's a made-up company, like Bill said. The world's leading provider of entertainment. I don't know that. I mean, we got Disney in the world. This is what public relations does. Is it basically wants to present everything in its best light. Nothing anything wrong with that. It's just part of business. Announced that it was forming an office of the chief executive and a broad restructuring of management roles. Okay, so you have to ask yourself is like, let's say I'm trying to shop for something. I don't know. At a mall or something like that. I want entertainment or something like that, and I go to the Megalomania store, and I want to shop there. And I think to myself, well, I don't know if I want to shop there because they're going through a broad restructuring of management role. You think that would really happen? Nobody really care, right? Isn't that kind of boring? You know, what you want to do is you want to humanize this. You want to TMZ this. You know what's TMZ? Anybody know? I mean, that's hyperbole, TMZ. But what's TMZ? Anybody know? TMZ, by the way, is they're not entirely responsible. In fact, they pay people for money and that sort of thing for information and stuff like that. I don't recommend them as a journalism thing, but one thing, they are probably one of the most popular news media sites because they report on the scandals. You know, and oftentimes they're the first. I hate to say this, but this is not a good thing. But when Kobe Bryant unfortunately passed away, they were the ones that told the story. So it's like they are actually kind of out in front of these things. So anyway, what you want to do is you want to find whatever essentially scandal is it within here, okay? And what you have to do is there's a paragraph in here, okay, that really kind of should call out to you what this story is about. What I'd like you to do, if everybody's paying attention and listening to me right now, okay, is to find that paragraph. And it's not required, but I really strongly recommend that you reach out to me. We can do this in class too, okay? You reach out to me and you say what you think this story should be focused on. Which paragraph? There's actually two paragraphs, really. But
Yeah, there's a couple things that should be what are red flags that basically should set off like your news or your meter for whenever you're in journalism, you have to think about the question. The primary question is who cares, like, and you have to like look at all news from that standpoint, and why would my audience care about this?
right. And so like when you're actually like shopping or something like that, now you might actually find something within this press release that may lead to information that make me think like, ew, like ew, that sort of thing. So, but this is all.
Or a bigger question is why are they reshuffling the management?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They're reshuffling the management. They're making everything look good. Look, they're improving everything. They're making everything look good. The company's great, in great shape, but they're only doing that because something bad happened. So now here's the thing, though. Okay, what you need to do is now Bill's going to play an acting role. Okay, he's going to play essentially the spokesman. Bill, you don't mind being quoted directly as your name? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I figure, and yeah, please send me an email if you have questions tied to this press release.
This is just so you know, in real life, this Bill's not actual job. So if you do any kind of like Google search, this is not going to come up. I've had people like say like it's funny like oh yeah they're trying to this past years. I've had a couple people come to me and say like I Googled this to see what was there. I was like, why are you Googling this? Are you trying to find the story?
Yeah,
We can't be.
we're saying this. This company is completely fictional. It's something that I cooked up in my imagination. But believe it or not, it's based on real events.
It's actually based on a real thing that actually happened. Yes, I've actually had a couple people discover that. So, but anyway, what you need to do is you need to find that what would be essentially the lead or the focus of the story within this press release. And then you need to go to Bill and email him here. Okay, if that's okay, Bill?
Yep.
And then
it's my Yahoo email address. Yeah.
And Yahoo, right? And basically say to him, what really happened here? Okay? Bill's going to supply you some pieces of information that will have it. And actually, it's not going to necessarily, he's going to play a little bit of like, I guess you could say, fake out or whatever, where you're not necessarily going to get, it's not going to be like so readily apparent what the information you need is. Okay, he's going to give you one of those. I won't tell you too much, but one of them is going to be a voucher on an Excel spreadsheet, and that's going to contain some very important information that actually makes this story more of a scandalous story. Okay, and basically one that will make this much more interesting than just some some restructuring of a company. Okay.
It's called color.
Yeah, right. So basically, that'll have information. That stuff. First of all, you need to find like what's the big thing that happened that caused them to restructure their roles, and then you got to find out what led, find out more information about that one happening. And he's got that information. You need to email him. I would do that ASAP, just without even thinking. You don't even have to
Yeah, just read the press release. Come up with 2 or 3 good questions, and I should be able to help you out.
Right. And then, yeah, exactly. Okay. Has everybody got that? Okay. I would email them today. Just email them to say, hello, hi, what's going on here? Or just, actually, I would suggest that if you want to be really careful, maybe just try to find out what you think maybe the focus of the story should be. One that would appeal not just to the media, not just to business executives, but like I said, that whole TMZ world, or even not just TMZ world. This is something that would be in the New York Times. This is something that basically could really shake the reputation of a company as much as.
Yeah. And what happened here is something that did happen in an executive suite 20 some odd years ago, and it was at a very large company and had far-reaching consequences about companies being examined about how they're run and what's called corporate governance, where you see one of the things that when you have a large company, you have a chief executive, but you have a board of directors that's responsible with hiring the chief executive and setting broad policy for the company. And then that chief executive is meant to execute that policy. So even if you're the top dog in any publicly traded business, you do answer to a board. And, there have been multiple times where I've had discussions with chief executives, and they would be like, well, I got to sell this into my board. And, it's kind of one of those facts of life that they have to deal with when, they are held extremely accountable, believe it or not. If they don't perform up to par, they could easily be replaced. But, that's a company with good governance. Where there's companies with lackadaisical governance, it's kind of like the CEO might pack the board with his or her friends, and that's where you have shoddy, that's where businesses tend to get into trouble, where you start to see, the board was asleep at the wheel, and they didn't really rein the CEO in.
You can write a 500, 800-word story on this, just like we've been doing, okay? He'll send you a document that provides some of the depth you need. He sends you that document, provide crucial and vital information for this assignment. But again, you have to figure out the focus first, right? And then quoting documents is something that reporters do. You just basically say it quoting the document. Yeah, that's how you attribute it.
And just, mention what kind of document you're citing. That's also very important too.
And then I'm available for any kind of help too. So, anyway, Bill, I wanted to thank you again very much, Bill.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's it, everybody. I thank you very much. Again, I'll go over more of this on Friday, but I would really strongly suggest that you get that email out. The video actually did contain more. It's just presented to you. Actually contain a little more information about who to contact, or when to contact, and what to do. So I will make a recording of this class and send it out. A couple people wrote to me, or one person wrote to me and said they actually got kicked off. I'm not sure what happened, but I'll send this out so maybe you can catch up. All right. Thanks very much, everybody, and I will be talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and one more, Joe Laramie, you there? You asked. He said, "Do we email him?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You email him and just basically ask him a broad question, saying like, "What happened here?" It's find that.
Okay.
Find that. That's a good question. Find that paragraph and just say what happened here.
All right. All right. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, and thanks for asking the question. Yep.